I pressed my back against the cold stone wall of the country club terrace, the rough texture biting through my jacket. The evening air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of expensive perfume and grilled steak from the banquet hall inside. Through the tall French windows, I could see my daughter, Emily, seated at a long table draped in white linen, surrounded by people I had never met. She was laughing at something, her head tilted back, her hand resting on the arm of a man I barely knew. His name was Andrew, her fiancé, and this was supposed to be their rehearsal dinner, but I wasn't supposed to be there. I had climbed over a low garden wall to reach this spot, my old joints protesting, my heart pounding with a mixture of guilt and determination. I had parked my car 3 blocks away, walked through the back alleys of the country club, and found a gap in the hedges that led to the terrace. It was undignified, unseemly, completely beneath the dignity of a 65-year-old man, but I didn't care. I had to see. I had to know why my daughter, my only child, the girl I had raised alone since she was 3 years old, had begged me not to come. "Dad," she had said on the phone 3 weeks ago, her voice strained with a tension I had never heard before. "I love you, but I don't think it's a good idea for you to come to the rehearsal dinner. It's complicated. Andrew's parents are very traditional, and I don't want there to be any awkwardness. Please understand." I had tried to hide my hurt, to keep my voice steady and calm. "Of course, sweetheart," I had said. "Whatever you need. I'll just see you at the wedding." She had thanked me, her voice bright with relief, and we had ended the call. But something had felt wrong. Something had felt deeply, profoundly wrong. Emily had always told me everything. We had been a team, a unit, an unbreakable bond forged through tragedy and loss. She had never shut me out before. And now she was keeping secrets. I pressed my face against the cool glass of the window, peering into the warm, golden glow of the banquet hall. The room was filled with about 50 guests, all dressed in their finest clothes. The tables were draped in white linen, adorned with centerpieces of roses and candles. A string quartet played softly in the corner, their music floating through the air like a gentle breeze. It was a scene of perfect elegance, a scene straight out of a magazine. But something was off. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. I watched Emily for a long moment, studying her face. She was smiling, but it was a forced smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was nodding along to something Andrew's mother was saying, but her posture was rigid, her shoulders tense. She was uncomfortable. She was scared. I had seen that look on her face before, once, when she was 16 and a boy had cornered her at a party. She had called me that night, crying, and I had driven across town to bring her home. I had held her while she sobbed, and I had promised her that I would always protect her. I had kept that promise, and now I was going to keep it again. Andrew's mother, Margaret, was a tall, sharp-featured woman with cold eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She wore a dress that probably cost more than my rent, her hair perfectly coiffed, her diamonds glittering under the chandeliers. She was the matriarch of the family, a woman who had married into old money and had never let anyone forget it. She spoke with an air of entitlement, her words dripping with condescension, her gestures grand and theatrical. She was the kind of woman who was used to getting what she wanted, who had never been told no, who believed that her wealth and status gave her the right to control everyone around her. Andrew's father, Robert, sat at the head of the table, a glass of scotch in his hand, his eyes scanning the room with detached superiority. He was a large man, with a ruddy face and a booming laugh that echoed through the hall. He looked like he was used to being the center of attention, used to people hanging on his every word. He was the kind of man who had built his fortune on the backs of others, who had never had to struggle or sacrifice. He looked at Emily not as a future daughter-in-law, but as a piece of property, an asset to be acquired and controlled. And I could see, with a sinking feeling in my stomach, that Emily knew it too. Andrew sat beside Emily, his hand on hers, his face a mask of practiced charm. He was handsome. I would give him that, with his expensive suit and his perfect smile. But there was something about him that didn't sit right with me. He was too smooth, too polished, too eager to please. He laughed at his father's jokes, nodded along with his mother's demands, and never once looked at Emily with the kind of love that should have been there. He looked at her the way a man looks at a possession he has just acquired, with satisfaction and ownership. I watched as Margaret placed her hand on Emily's arm, her grip just a little too tight, her smile just a little too sharp. "We're so happy to have you join our family, Emily," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "Our family is very traditional, and we have certain expectations. I'm sure you understand." Emily nodded, her face pale, her smile fixed in place. "Of course, Margaret. I understand. I'm ready to be a part of this family." I saw the fear in my daughter's eyes. I saw the way she flinched slightly when Margaret touched her. I saw the way she looked around the room, searching for Andrew, searching for support, searching for anyone who could save her. And I saw the way she held herself, rigid and small, as if she was trying to disappear. My daughter, my brave, strong, independent daughter, was terrified, and I had no idea why. I needed to get closer. I needed to hear what was being said, to understand the dynamics of this family, to uncover the secrets that were being hidden behind the perfect facade. I slipped away from the window, making my way around the terrace to a side door that led to a service corridor. It was unlocked, and I slipped inside, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. I made my way through the winding hallways, past the kitchens where chefs were preparing the next course, past the bathrooms where guests were freshening up, until I reached a small alcove near the main hall. From here, I could see the head table, hear the conversations, and remain hidden in the shadows. I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding, and I listened. Margaret was speaking again, her voice carrying across the room with practiced authority. "Emily, dear, we need to discuss the contract. I know it seems formal, but it's really just a formality. We like to make sure that everyone in the family understands their responsibilities." Emily's voice was small, barely audible. "I understand, Margaret. I've already signed the contract. Remember? You said it was just a formality." Margaret laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Oh, it is, dear. It is. But we need to make sure you fully understand the terms. You'll be expected to host dinners, attend charity events, manage the household staff. You'll need to give up your job, of course. It's not appropriate for a woman in our family to work outside the home." I felt a surge of anger course through me. Give up her job? Emily had worked hard to build her career, to become a successful architect, to stand on her own 2 feet. She had been so proud of her accomplishments, so determined to make something of herself. And now, these people wanted her to give it all up, to become a trophy wife, a decoration for their perfect family. I watched as Emily nodded, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. "Of course, Margaret. I understand. I'll do whatever is expected of me." I wanted to burst through the doors, to scream at them, to take my daughter and run. But I forced myself to stay calm, to stay hidden, to keep watching. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full extent of the trap they had set for my daughter. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I made my move. The dinner continued, and I watched as Margaret dominated the conversation, steering it away from Emily, away from anything that might make her feel included. She talked about the family's history, their connections, their wealth. She talked about the charity events they hosted, the politicians they knew, the influence they wielded. She made sure that Emily knew exactly how far beneath them she was, how lucky she was to be marrying into such a prestigious family. And Robert, the patriarch, just sat there, drinking his scotch, nodding along, his eyes never leaving Emily. He was assessing her, weighing her value, calculating what she would bring to the family. At one point, Andrew left the table, excusing himself to take a call. Emily was left alone with his parents, and I could see the panic rising in her eyes. She looked around the room, searching for a friendly face, for anyone who could save her. But there was no one. She was alone, trapped, surrounded by predators. I felt a surge of protective rage, a burning desire to storm into that room and take her away from these vultures. But I didn't. I stayed in the shadows, watching and waiting. And then, something happened that made my blood run cold. Robert leaned forward, his eyes fixed on Emily, his voice a low, threatening murmur. "I hope you understand, Emily, that we expect absolute loyalty. There will be no mistakes, no failures, no embarrassments. If you bring shame on this family, there will be consequences. I hope you understand what that means." Emily nodded, her face white as a sheet, her hands trembling in her lap. "Yes, Robert," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I understand." I had heard enough. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. I had to get Emily out of there, had to find a way to protect her from these monsters. I slipped away from the alcove, making my way back through the service corridors, back to the side door, back to the cold night air. I walked around the building, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do. I couldn't just barge in and drag her away. That would only make things worse. I needed a plan. I needed a strategy. I needed to fight fire with fire. I found a bench in the garden, hidden behind a hedge, and I sat down, trying to calm my racing heart. I thought about Emily, about the little girl who used to hold my hand, who used to tell me everything, who used to look at me like I was her whole world. I thought about the promise I had made to Sarah, the promise to protect our daughter, the promise to always be there for her. I had kept that promise for 25 years, and I wasn't going to break it now. I pulled out my phone and called Emily. She didn't answer, but I left a message. "Emily, it's Dad. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please call me back as soon as you can." I hung up and waited, my eyes fixed on the country club, watching the lights flicker in the windows. I didn't know how long it would be before she got my message, before she could slip away to call me back. But I was patient. I would wait as long as it took. An hour passed, then 2. The guests began to leave, their cars pulling out of the parking lot, their laughter fading into the night. I waited, watching the door, waiting for Emily to emerge. And finally, she did. She walked out alone, her coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, her head down, her footsteps slow and heavy. She walked to the edge of the parking lot, where a bench sat under a streetlight, and she sat down, her phone in her hand. I walked over to her, my footsteps quiet on the pavement. She looked up, startled, and then her face crumpled. "Dad!" she whispered. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here." I sat down beside her, taking her hand in mine. "I know," I said. "I know I shouldn't be here, but I had to. I had to see what was going on. I had to know why you didn't want me to come." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could handle it on my own. I thought I could make it work. But I was wrong. I was so wrong." I held her while she cried, feeling her body shake with sobs. I remembered the night she was 16, when a boy had cornered her at a party. I remembered holding her then, promising her that I would always protect her. And I promised her again, right then, in that parking lot. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said. "It's okay. I'm here now. I'm not going to let them hurt you. I'm going to get you out of this. I promise." She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "How, Dad? How are you going to get me out of this? They have so much power, so much money. They'll destroy us." I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "Maybe they think they have all the power," I said. "But they don't have the truth. And I'm going to find out exactly what they're hiding. And when I do, I'm going to expose them for who they really are." Emily stared at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and doubt. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I squeezed her hand. "I'm going to investigate," I said. "I'm going to find out everything I can about Andrew's family, and I'm going to use that information to get you out of this engagement." She shook her head slowly. "I signed a contract, Dad. I signed a contract that says I have to go through with the wedding, or they'll sue me for everything I have." I smiled. "Contracts can be broken," I said. "If they're based on fraud, they're not valid. And I have a feeling that there's a lot of fraud in this family." Emily was silent for a long moment, processing my words. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, Dad," she said. "Okay, I trust you." I hugged her tightly, feeling the tension in her body slowly begin to ease. "I'm going to fix this," I said. "I promise." She nodded, and I walked her back to the country club, where she had to go back inside and say goodbye to Andrew. I watched her disappear through the doors, my heart filled with determination. I had a mission now. I was going to expose Andrew's family for who they truly were. I was going to save my daughter from the trap she had fallen into, and I was going to make sure that they would never hurt her again. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I didn't know what secrets I would uncover. But I knew one thing for sure. I was going to attend that wedding. And I was going to make sure that everyone knew the truth. I sat in my car outside the country club, watching the last of the guests trickle out into the night. Emily had gone back inside to say goodbye to Andrew, and I had made my way to the parking lot, my mind racing with everything I had witnessed. The threats, the demands, the contract, the cold, calculating eyes of Margaret and Robert. The way they had spoken to my daughter, as if she were a piece of property to be acquired and controlled. I had never felt such rage in my entire life. I had survived poverty, loss, and the death of my wife. I had faced every challenge life had thrown at me with dignity and strength. But this was different. This was my daughter, and someone was going to pay. I started my car and drove home, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road. The streets were quiet, the city settling into the silence of the night. But my mind was anything but quiet. I was already planning my next move, already thinking about how I was going to uncover the secrets of Andrew's family. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I had to find out who these people really were. I had to find out what they were hiding. The next morning, I woke up early, my body tired, but my mind sharp. I made a pot of coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and began to make a plan. I thought about the things Margaret had said at the dinner, the way she had talked about the family's history, their connections, their influence. I thought about the contract Emily had signed, the threats Robert had made. I thought about the fear in my daughter's eyes, and I knew that I couldn't do this alone. I needed help. I called an old friend, a man named Frank. Frank was a retired private investigator, a man I had known for 30 years. We had met when I was working at the factory, and he was a security guard. We had become friends, bonded by our shared struggles and our determination to build better lives for our families. Frank had gone on to become a successful investigator, working on cases that ranged from corporate espionage to missing persons. He knew how to dig, how to uncover secrets, how to find the truth, and he owed me a favor. I had helped him through a difficult time years ago when his wife had been sick and he couldn't afford the medical bills. I had given him money, no questions asked, and I had never asked for anything in return. Until now. "Frank," I said when he answered the phone, "I need your help. It's about my daughter. She's engaged to a man named Andrew, and I think his family is hiding something. I need you to dig into their past. I need to know everything." Frank was silent for a moment. "You know, I'm retired, right? I don't do this anymore." "I know," I said, "but this is important. This is my daughter's life. I need to protect her, and I can't do it alone. Please, Frank, I'm begging you." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Frank sighed. "All right, but you owe me one, and I mean it this time." I smiled, a wave of relief washing over me. "I'll owe you forever. Just find out what you can. And be careful. These people are dangerous." Frank chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "I've dealt with dangerous people before. They're all the same. They think they're untouchable. They're usually wrong." We agreed to meet later that day, and I hung up the phone, my heart pounding with anticipation. The investigation was about to begin. I met Frank at a diner in the city, a quiet place where we wouldn't be overheard. He was sitting in a booth in the corner, nursing a cup of black coffee, his eyes scanning the room with the practiced vigilance of a man who had spent his life watching people. He looked older than I remembered, his hair now gray, his face lined with the years. But his eyes were still sharp, still alert. He nodded as I sat down across from him. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." I told him about Emily, about Andrew, about the rehearsal dinner. I told him about Margaret and Robert, about the threats and the demands, about the contract Emily had signed. I told him about the fear I had seen in my daughter's eyes, the fear that had driven me to this moment. Frank listened in silence, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back in his seat, his fingers steepled in front of him. "This sounds like a classic control scenario," he said. "They're trying to isolate Emily, make her dependent on them. The contract, the threats, the demands. It's all about control. They want to own her." I know. That's why I need you to find out what they're hiding. People like this always have secrets. I need to know what they are." Frank nodded slowly. "I'll start digging." But I need to warn you, if they're as powerful as they seem, they're not going to go down easily. They're going to fight back. Are you ready for that? I looked him in the eye, my voice steady. I'm ready for anything, as long as my daughter is safe. Frank began his investigation that afternoon. He started with the public records, searching for information about Andrew's family. He looked at their business dealings, their financial history, their connections. He looked for any signs of fraud, corruption, or criminal activity. And he found something that made my blood run cold. Andrew's family was not as wealthy as they pretended to be. They had built their fortune on a foundation of lies, using their influence to secure loans and investments that they never repaid. They had a history of bankruptcies and lawsuits, a trail of broken promises and betrayed partners. They were not successful business people. They were con artists, predators who preyed on the trust of others to build their empire of lies. Frank also discovered that Andrew had a history of failed relationships. He had been engaged twice before, and both women had disappeared from his life under mysterious circumstances. Neither of them had ever spoken publicly about what had happened, but Frank had found a way to contact one of them. She had agreed to meet with him, to tell him the truth about Andrew and his family. I met with the woman a few days later. Her name was Rachel, and she was a quiet, nervous woman who seemed to carry the weight of a terrible secret. She sat across from me in the same diner where I had met Frank, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that she never touched. She looked at me with tired eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I should be doing this," she said. "I don't want to get involved. I just want to move on with my life." "I understand," I said, "but my daughter is about to make the same mistake you made. She's about to marry into that family, and I need to stop it. Please, help me help her." Rachel was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "I'll tell you what happened." She told me about Andrew, about the charm and the promises and the lies. She told me about his parents, about the control they exerted over every aspect of her life. She told me about the contract she had signed, the threats she had received when she tried to leave. She told me about the fear that had consumed her, the fear that had driven her to flee in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. And she told me about the final straw, the moment when she had realized that Andrew's family would never let her go. "I found something," she said. "A file in Andrew's office. It was about the family's finances. They were in debt, deeply in debt. They were using the marriages to pay off their creditors. They would marry off their son to a wealthy woman, take her money, and then make sure she couldn't leave. It was a pattern, a cycle. And I was just one of the victims. I listened in silence, my heart pounding with rage. I had suspected something was wrong, but I had never imagined this. These people weren't just controlling. They were criminals. They had been preying on vulnerable women for years, using their wealth and influence to trap them in a web of lies and manipulation. And now, they had set their sights on my daughter. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside me. "Thank you for telling me this. You've helped more than you know." Rachel nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "Just make sure she gets out," she said. "Make sure she doesn't end up like me." I left the diner, my mind racing. I had the information I needed, but I didn't know what to do with it. I couldn't just confront Andrew's family. They would deny everything, twist the truth, make me look like a paranoid father. I needed proof. I needed evidence that would hold up in court. I needed to find a way to break the contract Emily had signed, a way to free her from the trap she had fallen into. I called Frank and told him what I had learned. He was silent for a moment, then he spoke, his voice grim. "We need to dig deeper," he said. "We need to find more evidence. If we can prove that they're committing fraud, we can use that to break the contract." "How?" I asked. "How do we prove fraud?" Frank was silent for a moment. "I have a contact," he said, "a forensic accountant. She's the best in the business. If there's something wrong with their finances, she'll find it." I met with the forensic accountant, a sharp, intelligent woman named Linda. She agreed to help, and she began to comb through Andrew's family's financial records. She found evidence of fraud, evidence of embezzlement, evidence of money laundering. She found hidden accounts, shell companies, and a trail of financial crimes that stretched back years. She documented everything, preparing a report that would be devastating if it ever saw the light of day. I had the proof I needed, but I still didn't know how to use it. I couldn't just hand it over to the authorities. Andrew's family was well connected, and I knew that any attempt to expose them would be met with fierce resistance. I needed a plan, a strategy. I needed to fight fire with fire. I called Emily and told her to meet me at a quiet cafe in the city. She arrived looking tired and pale, dark circles under her eyes. She had been trying to hide her fear, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She sat down across from me, her hands trembling slightly. "Dad," she said, "what's going on? You said it was important." I took her hand in mine, my voice gentle. "I've been doing some research," I said. "I've been looking into Andrew's family, and I found some things that you need to know." Emily's face went pale. "What kind of things?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I told her about Rachel, about the failed engagements, about the financial fraud. I told her about the contract she had signed, the trap she had fallen into. I told her everything, holding nothing back. Emily listened in silence, her face growing paler with each word. When I finished, she was crying, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I didn't know," she said. "I didn't know any of this. I thought I was in love. I thought he was the one. And now I find out that he's been lying to me this whole time." "You're not to blame," I said. "He's a con artist. They're all con artists. They've been doing this for years. But now we know the truth, and we're going to use it to get you out of this." Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with hope and doubt. "How? Dad, how are we going to do this? They have so much power, so much money. They'll destroy us." I smiled, a cold, hard smile. "They think they have all the power, but they don't have the truth. And the truth is the most powerful weapon of all. I have evidence of their crimes. I have everything we need to break the contract and expose them for who they really are. But we have to be careful. We have to be strategic. And we have to strike at exactly the right moment." Emily nodded slowly, a flicker of determination in her eyes. "Okay, Dad, I trust you. What do you need me to do?" I squeezed her hand. "I need you to go back to Andrew. I need you to act like everything is normal. I need you to pretend that you don't know anything. Can you do that?" Emily took a deep breath, her face hardening with resolve. "Yes," she said. "I can do that. I can be brave." I hugged her tightly, feeling the tension in her body slowly begin to ease. "That's my girl," I said. "We're going to get through this. I promise." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I worked with Frank and Linda, gathering more evidence, building a case against Andrew's family. We uncovered a web of corruption and fraud that stretched back years, involving some of the most powerful people in the city. It was dangerous work, and I knew that I was taking a risk. But I didn't care. My daughter's freedom was worth any risk. Meanwhile, Emily played her part. She went to dinner with Andrew and his parents, acted like the doting fiancé, and smiled through the lies and the manipulation. She was terrified, but she never showed it. She was stronger than she knew, stronger than I had ever imagined, and I was so proud of her. The day of the wedding was approaching fast. I had to act quickly, before it was too late. I had to find a way to expose Andrew's family, to break the contract, to set my daughter free. And I had to do it in a way that would leave no doubt, no room for denial, no possibility of escape. I called a meeting with Frank and Linda, and we went over the final details of the plan. We had everything we needed. The evidence of fraud, the proof of manipulation, the testimony of Andrew's previous victims. We had enough to destroy Andrew's family's reputation, to bring them to justice, to free Emily from the trap they had set for her. But we had to be careful. We had to be strategic. And we had to strike at exactly the right moment. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday. The rehearsal dinner was on Friday night, the same event I had attended secretly weeks ago. I decided to make my move at the wedding itself. It would be the perfect stage, the perfect moment. I would expose Andrew's family in front of everyone they knew, everyone they respected, everyone they had lied to and manipulated. I called Emily and told her the plan. She was nervous, but she was ready. She had been through so much, and she had come out stronger. She was no longer the scared, vulnerable woman who had signed that contract. She was a warrior, a survivor, and she was ready to fight for her freedom. The day of the wedding arrived, bright and clear, a perfect day for a wedding. I dressed in my best suit, a simple gray suit that I had worn only a handful of times. I drove to the church, my heart pounding with anticipation. I was about to do something that would change my daughter's life forever, and I was ready. The church was beautiful, filled with flowers and candles and the soft glow of stained glass windows. The guests were already arriving, dressed in their finest clothes, their faces bright with anticipation. I walked through the crowd, my eyes scanning the room, looking for Emily. She was in the bridal suite, getting ready, and I knew I wouldn't see her until the ceremony began. But I could feel her presence, could feel the fear and hope that filled the air. I took my seat in the back row, near the door, where I could see everything and everyone. I watched as Andrew's family entered, their faces masks of practiced charm. Margaret was wearing a dress that cost more than most people's houses, her diamonds glittering under the chandeliers. Robert was wearing a custom-tailored suit, his eyes scanning the room with the same cold superiority I had seen at the rehearsal dinner. They looked like the perfect family, the picture of wealth and success. But I knew the truth. I knew about the debts and the fraud and the lies. I knew about the women they had destroyed, and I was about to expose them for who they really were. The ceremony began, and Emily walked down the aisle, her arm linked through the arm of her uncle, the only family she had left. She was beautiful, radiant, her white dress flowing behind her like a cloud. But I could see the fear in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She was playing her part, acting the role of the happy bride. But I knew the truth. She was terrified, and I was about to save her. The priest began to speak, his voice echoing through the church. He talked about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage. I listened in silence, my heart pounding, waiting for the right moment. I waited until Andrew and Emily had exchanged their vows, until the priest was about to pronounce them husband and wife. And then I stood up. "Stop," I said, my voice echoing through the church. "I have something to say." The room fell silent. Every face turned toward me, every eye filled with shock and confusion. Andrew's face went pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. Margaret's smile froze on her face. Robert's hand tightened around his glass of champagne. Emily looked at me, her eyes filled with tears of relief. She knew what was coming. She was ready. "I am Emily's father," I said, my voice steady and strong. "And I have evidence that this wedding is a fraud. Andrew's family is not who they claim to be. They are criminals, con artists, predators who have been preying on vulnerable women for years. I have proof of their crimes, evidence of their fraud, testimony from the women they have destroyed, and I will not stand by and let my daughter become their next victim." The church erupted into chaos. Margaret was screaming, her face red with rage. Robert was shouting, demanding that I be removed. Andrew was staring at Emily, his face a mask of disbelief. And Emily, my brave, strong daughter, stood tall, her eyes fixed on me, her voice clear and steady. "He's telling the truth," she said. "I signed a contract. They forced me to sign a contract that would give them control over my life. They threatened me. They manipulated me. They tried to trap me. But I'm not going to let them. I'm not going to marry into a family of liars and thieves." I walked up to the altar, my heart pounding. I pulled out the folder I had been carrying, the folder filled with evidence of Andrew's family's crimes. I handed it to the priest, my voice steady. "This is the truth," I said. "Read it. Share it with the congregation. Let them see who they were about to celebrate." The priest opened the folder, his eyes scanning the documents. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. He looked at Andrew's family, his voice trembling. "I cannot perform this ceremony," he said. "This marriage is based on fraud and deception. It is not valid in the eyes of God or the law." The congregation erupted into chaos again, some of the guests crying out in shock, others murmuring in disbelief. Andrew's family tried to flee, but Frank was waiting at the door, his hand on his phone, ready to call the authorities. "You're not going anywhere," he said. "The police are already on their way. There's nowhere to run." I walked over to Emily and took her hand. "Let's go," I said. "Let's get out of here." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. We walked out of the church together, leaving behind the chaos and the lies and the deception. We walked into the light, into the freedom, into the rest of our lives. The police arrived moments later, arresting Margaret and Robert for fraud and embezzlement. Andrew was taken into custody as well, charged with conspiracy and accessory to fraud. The investigation that followed uncovered the full extent of their crimes, exposing a network of corruption that stretched back decades. They were convicted and sentenced to prison, their empire of lies crumbling around them. Emily was free. She had escaped the trap that Andrew's family had set for her, and she had done it with the help of her father. She looked at me, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you, Dad," she said. "Thank you for saving me." I held her tight, my heart full of love and pride. "You saved yourself, sweetheart," I said. "You were brave, you were strong, and you never gave up. I'm so proud of you." The wedding that nearly destroyed us became the foundation for our greatest victory. Andrew's betrayal, as painful as it was, had taught Emily the importance of trust and honesty. It had shown her that love isn't about what you can take from someone, but what you can give. And it had brought her closer to me than ever before. I looked at my daughter, a successful architect, a strong and independent woman, and I knew that everything I had sacrificed, everything I had worked for, was worth it. She had become the woman I always knew she could be. She had carried on the legacy I had built and made it her own. The scars of Andrew's betrayal would never fully heal. There would always be a part of Emily that remembered the pain, the humiliation, the loss. But she didn't let it define her. She used it as a reminder of how far she had come, of the strength she had found within herself, of the love that surrounded her. She was a survivor, a woman who had faced the darkest moment of her life and emerged stronger and wiser. And I was so proud of her. I am an old man now, and I know my time is short. But I have no regrets. I have lived a full life, a life of purpose and meaning. I have protected my daughter, and I have watched her grow into a woman who embodies everything I ever hoped she would be. That is my legacy. That is my vindication. The church was chaos. I stood at the altar, my hand gripping Emily's, watching as Andrew's family tried to flee. Frank was at the door, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice calm as he spoke to the dispatcher. Margaret was screaming, her carefully constructed mask of perfection completely shattered. Robert was shouting, his face red with rage, demanding that someone stop me, that someone arrest me, that someone do something. But no one moved. No one spoke. They were all frozen, stunned by the truth that had just been revealed. I watched as the police arrived, their sirens wailing in the distance, their footsteps echoing through the church. They handcuffed Margaret and Robert, reading them their rights as they led them out of the building. Andrew tried to follow, but one of the officers stopped him, placing him in handcuffs as well. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. He looked at Emily, his voice pleading. "Emily, please, tell them it's a mistake. Tell them I didn't do anything wrong." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and disgust. "You did everything wrong, Andrew," she said. "You lied to me. You manipulated me. You tried to trap me, and I will never forgive you for that." Andrew's face crumpled, and he was led away, his protests fading into the distance. The church was silent, the guests slowly trickling out, their faces shocked and confused. The priest stood at the altar, his hands trembling, the folder of evidence still clutched in his grasp. He looked at Emily, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, my child. I had no idea." Emily nodded, her face pale but composed. "It's not your fault," she said. "They fooled everyone. They were very good at it." I put my arm around my daughter, leading her out of the church and into the cool afternoon air. The sun was shining, the sky a brilliant blue, but the world felt different somehow. Lighter, brighter, as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. We walked to my car, and I opened the door for Emily. She climbed in, and I drove us away from the church, away from the chaos, away from the lies and the deception. The drive was silent, the weight of what had just happened hanging heavy between us. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know how to comfort her. I just knew that I had to be there for her, that I had to help her get through this. When we arrived at my house, Emily went straight to her old room, the room she had grown up in, and collapsed onto the bed. I heard her crying, muffled sobs that broke my heart. I wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be all right. But I knew she needed time to process what had happened. I went to the kitchen and made a pot of tea, sitting at the table and waiting for her to come out. The hours passed slowly, the silence of the house weighing on me. I thought about Andrew and his family, the people who had tried to destroy my daughter. I thought about the pain they had caused, the damage they had done, and I thought about how I had failed to protect her. I had known something was wrong, but I hadn't acted quickly enough. I had let her get too close to them, and now my daughter was paying the price. Finally, around midnight, Emily came out of her room. Her eyes were red and swollen, but her face was calmer. She sat down across from me at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that I had poured for her. "I can't believe it's over," she said quietly. "I can't believe I'm free." I reached across the table and took her hand. "It's over, sweetheart. You're free." "And you never have to see them again," Emily nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I loved him, Dad. I really loved him. I thought he was the one." "I know," I said. "I know you did. But he wasn't who you thought he was. He was wearing a mask, and he was very good at it. But the truth always comes out in the end." The next few weeks were difficult for Emily. She was dealing with the betrayal, the loss, the shame of having been deceived. She went through the motions of her life, but I could see that she was struggling. She went to work, came home, and sat in her room for hours. She didn't want to talk to anyone. She didn't want to see anyone. She just wanted to be alone. I gave her space, but I also kept an eye on her, making sure she was eating, making sure she was taking care of herself. I knew it would take time for her to heal, and I was patient. I was there for her whenever she needed me. The trial was a media sensation. Andrew's family's past was exposed, and the world learned the truth about the predators who had been targeting vulnerable women for years. The courtroom was packed every day, reporters and cameras and curious onlookers. Emily testified, her voice steady and strong, telling the jury about the lies and manipulation. I testified as well, telling them about the evidence I had gathered, the proof of their crimes. Margaret and Robert sat in the defendant's chair, their faces pale, their eyes empty. They had lost everything, their wealth, their status, their carefully constructed facade. All of it was gone. They were just criminals, facing the consequences of their actions. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they returned their verdict, it was guilty on all counts. Margaret and Robert were sentenced to 20 years in prison, a sentence that they accepted without emotion. Andrew was sentenced to 10 years, his face a mask of defeat. He was led away in handcuffs, his eyes fixed on Emily, his voice pleading. "Emily, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Emily didn't look at him. She just sat there, her face pale, her hands clasped in her lap. "It's over," she said quietly. "It's finally over." The trial ended, and Emily began the long process of healing. She started seeing a therapist, a woman who specialized in helping victims of emotional abuse and manipulation. She started writing in a journal, pouring out her feelings onto the pages. She started spending more time with friends, rebuilding the connections that had been damaged by her relationship with Andrew. And slowly, painfully, she began to heal. I watched her, my heart full of pride and love. She was stronger than she knew, braver than she could imagine. She had faced the darkest moment of her life and emerged stronger and wiser, and I was so proud of her. Months passed, and Emily began to smile again. She started dating, cautiously at first, then more confidently. She found a man who treated her with respect, who valued her for who she was, not for what she could give him. His name was David, and he was kind and honest and loyal. He didn't have money or status, but he had something far more valuable. He had integrity. He had a good heart, and he loved my daughter with all of it. I watched them fall in love, slowly and naturally, without the pressure and manipulation that had defined her relationship with Andrew. I watched Emily blossom, her confidence returning, her smile brightening. She was happy again, truly happy, and I was grateful. They got married a year later, a small ceremony in my backyard, surrounded by friends and family. There were no crystal chandeliers, no designer gowns, no lobster dinners. Just love, simple and pure and true. I walked my daughter down the aisle, my arm linked through hers, my heart full of joy. She was radiant, her face glowing with happiness. She had found her way out of the darkness, and she had found her way to love. The years passed, and Emily and David built a life together. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and I watched them grow, just as I had watched Emily grow. I was there for every milestone, every birthday, every holiday. I was the proud grandfather, the doting father, the keeper of the family legacy. I thought about Andrew sometimes, the man who had tried to destroy my daughter. I wondered where he was now, what he was doing, if he had found any peace. I didn't wish him ill. I didn't wish him harm, but I didn't wish him well either. He had made his choices, and he was living with the consequences. I had moved on from the anger and the bitterness. I had found peace in the love of my family, in the joy of my grandchildren, in the success of the legacy I had built. Andrew had been a chapter in our story, a dark chapter that we had survived and grown from. But he was no longer a part of our lives. He was just a memory, a lesson learned, a cautionary tale. As I look back on my life, I realized that the secret I kept from Emily was never really about the money. It was about building a future, creating a better life for my family, and leaving a legacy of love and integrity. I had kept the secret for so long, worried that wealth would corrupt my daughter, afraid that she would become entitled and lazy. But I was wrong. Emily proved that wealth doesn't have to corrupt. It can inspire, uplift, and transform. She used her inheritance to build a better life for herself and her family, to give back to her community, and to create a legacy of compassion and generosity. She proved that money can be a force for good, a tool for building a better world. I think about Andrew's family sometimes, the predators who tried to destroy my daughter. I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't acted, if I had let the wedding proceed. Emily would have been trapped in a life of manipulation and control, a prisoner in her own marriage. But I had acted in time, exposing the truth and saving my daughter from a life of misery. I am grateful for the courage to act, for the strength to face the truth, and for the love that drove me to protect my family. The apartment complex has become more than just a business. It has become a symbol of everything our family stands for. Hard work, perseverance, integrity, and above all, love. I walk through the grounds now, watching the tenants go about their lives, and I feel a sense of peace. I have built something that will last long after I'm gone. Something that will continue to grow and thrive, to support families and build communities. Something that will honor the memory of my wife, Sarah, and the sacrifices she made. Something that will carry on the legacy I have built for my children and their children. The wedding that nearly destroyed us became the foundation for our greatest victory. Andrew's betrayal, as painful as it was, taught Emily the importance of trust and honesty. It showed her that love isn't about what you can take from someone, but what you can give. And it brought her to David, the man who truly loved her for who she was. I look at my daughter now, a successful architect, a loving wife, a devoted mother. And I know that everything I sacrificed, everything I worked for, was worth it. She has become the woman I always knew she could be. She has carried on the legacy I built and made it her own. Scars of Andrew's betrayal will never fully heal. There will always be a part of Emily that remembers the pain, the humiliation, the loss. But she doesn't let it define her. She uses it as a reminder of how far she has come, of the strength she found within herself, of the love that surrounds her. She is a survivor, a woman who faced the darkest moment of her life and emerged stronger and wiser. And I am so proud of her. I am an old man now, and I know my time is short, but I have no regrets. I have lived a full life, a life of purpose and meaning. I have built something that will outlast me, something that will provide for my family for generations to come. And I have watched my daughter grow into a woman who embodies everything I ever hoped she would be. That is my legacy. That is my vindication. Think about the day I snuck into that rehearsal dinner, hiding in the shadows, watching my daughter laugh with strangers. I think about the fear I saw in her eyes, the fear that drove me to investigate. I think about the evidence I gathered, the plan I made, the moment I stood up in that church and exposed the truth. It was the most terrifying moment of my life, and the most liberating. I had faced my fears, and I had won. I had protected my daughter, and I had set her free. And I had done it all with the help of the people who loved me. I think about Frank, the friend who had helped me uncover the truth. I think about Linda, the forensic accountant who had found the evidence of fraud. I think about Rachel, the woman who had shared her story and helped me understand the pattern of abuse. I think about all the people who had come together to help me save my daughter. They were the real heroes, the ones who had made it possible, and I would be forever grateful. I think about Emily, my brave, strong daughter. I think about the little girl who used to hold my hand, who used to tell me everything, who used to look at me like I was her whole world. I think about the woman she has become, the woman who faced her fears and emerged stronger and wiser. I think about the love she has found, the family she has built, the legacy she will carry on. And I am so proud of her. I think about Sarah, my beautiful wife, the woman I loved and lost. I think about the promise I made to her, the promise to protect our daughter, the promise to always be there for her. I think about how I kept that promise, how I fought for Emily, how I saved her from the trap that had been set for her. And I know that Sarah is watching, proud of the man I have become, proud of the father I have been. I sit in my garden now, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The air is warm, the scent of roses filling the air. Emily and David are inside, playing with their children, their laughter echoing through the house. It is a perfect moment, a moment of peace and contentment. And I know that this is what matters. Not the buildings, not the money, not the business. This, the love, the family, the connection. I used to walk through life alone, thinking I had to carry the weight of the world on my shoulders. Every sacrifice I made, every struggle I endured, I thought I was building something for myself. I never thought I'd find a love so deep, a family so strong, a legacy so lasting. I never thought my hands, so used to hard work and struggle, would build something that would touch so many lives. They tried to destroy us, the predators who saw only dollar signs. But the truth was always waiting, patient and unyielding, to finally set us free. I am the one who built it, the one who held the dream, the one who saw the future when no one else could see. I carried the weight of that dream, the burden of that hope, and I knew that I had to see it through. Forgiving doesn't mean you let the darkness stay. It means you shine a light and watch it all burn away. I am stronger than the challenges I faced along the way. I am braver than the fear that tried to silence my heart. I carry love inside my soul, a fire that won't die down. I built the foundation, and I finally took control. The world may try to tear down what we build with love and care, but the foundation will always stand, strong beyond compare. And when they ask me who I am, I'll smile and answer softly. I am not defined by loss. I am defined by what I chose to share. I am vindicated. Emily and David had 3 children, a boy and 2 girls. The oldest, named Sarah after my late wife, was a brilliant student who went on to become a doctor. The middle child, Michael, took after his mother and became an architect, designing sustainable housing for low-income communities. The youngest, Grace, was a teacher, passionate about educating children who came from underprivileged backgrounds. They all carried on the legacy of compassion and generosity, each in their own way. The apartment complex continued to thrive, becoming a model for affordable housing across the city. Emily had taken over the management of the property, using the rental income to fund scholarships, community programs, and healthcare initiatives. She had turned the complex into a true community, a place where families could grow and flourish. She had honored my legacy and made it her own. I lived to see my great-grandchildren, to hold them in my arms and tell them stories about their great-grandmother Sarah, about the struggles and the triumphs, about the love that had built our family. I watched them grow, their faces bright with hope and promise, and I knew that my legacy was secure. The values I had instilled in Emily, the values she had passed on to her children, would continue for generations to come. The years passed, and I grew old and frail, but I was content. I had lived a full life, a life of purpose and meaning. I had built something that would outlast me, something that would provide for my family for generations to come. And I had watched my daughter grow into a woman who embodied everything I ever hoped she would be. That was my legacy. That was my vindication. On my deathbed, surrounded by my children, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had done what I set out to do. I had protected my family. I had built a legacy of love and integrity, and I had found peace. Emily held my hand, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Dad," she said. "Thank you for everything. For the legacy, for the love, for always being there. I don't know where I would be without you." I smiled, my voice barely a whisper. "You would have found your way, sweetheart," I said. "You always have. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the woman you've become." I closed my eyes, and I felt the love of my family wash over me. I thought about Sarah, waiting for me on the other side. I thought about the life I had lived, the struggles I had overcome, the triumphs I had achieved. And I knew that I had done well. I had kept my promise. I had protected my daughter. I had built a legacy that would last for generations. The world may try to tear down what we build with love and care, but the foundation will always stand, strong beyond compare. And when they ask me who I am, I'll smile and answer softly. I am not defined by loss. I am defined by what I chose to share. I am vindicated. Emily carried on the legacy, transforming the apartment complex into a thriving community. She added a community center, a health clinic, and a childcare facility. She partnered with local schools and businesses to provide job training and educational opportunities for the tenants. She had taken what I had built and made it into something even greater, something that would continue to grow and evolve for generations to come. The story of my daughter's near marriage to Andrew's family became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers of manipulation and control. Emily spoke at schools and community centers, sharing her story and warning others about the signs of emotional abuse. She became an advocate for victims of domestic violence and financial exploitation, using her platform to raise awareness and drive change. And I, from wherever I am watching with pride. She is my legacy, my vindication, and I have no regrets. I lived a full life, a life of purpose and meaning. I built something that will outlast me, something that will provide for my family for generations to come. And I watched my daughter grow into a woman who embodies everything I ever hoped she would be. The world may change around me, the stars may fade above, but I will always carry with me the strength of selfless love. And when they ask me who I am, I'll smile and answer softly. I am not defined by fear. I am defined by what I overcame. I am vindicated. The apartment complex grew over the years, expanding to include more units, more amenities, more opportunities for the community. Emily's vision had transformed it into a model of sustainable urban living, a place where families could thrive and children could grow up with hope and opportunity. The scholarship program she had established had helped hundreds of students attend college, many of whom had gone on to become teachers, engineers, doctors, and entrepreneurs. The community center had become a hub of activity, hosting events, workshops, and support groups. The health clinic had provided care to thousands of people who otherwise would have gone without. Emily had become a respected figure in the community, known for her compassion, her dedication, and her tireless work to improve the lives of others. She had been recognized by the city council, the state legislature, and even the governor for her contributions to affordable housing and community development. But she never sought the spotlight. She was too busy building, too busy helping, too busy loving. David had been by her side every step of the way, supporting her, encouraging her, and caring for their children. He had become a successful architect himself, designing sustainable buildings that were both beautiful and functional. He had collaborated with Emily on several projects, combining their talents to create spaces that were not only environmentally friendly, but also welcoming and inclusive. Their children had grown up with a deep sense of purpose and responsibility, knowing that they were part of something larger than themselves. Sarah, the oldest, had followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a doctor who worked with underserved communities. Michael, the middle child, had become an architect, inspired by his father's work and his mother's passion for affordable housing. Grace, the youngest, had become a teacher, educating children from low-income families and helping them dream of a better future. The family legacy had continued, passed down from generation to generation, each one adding their own contribution, their own vision, their own love. It had become a living legacy, a dynamic force for good that would continue to grow and evolve long after I was gone. And I, from wherever I was, watched with pride and gratitude. I had built something that would outlast me, something that would provide for my family for generations to come. I had protected my daughter, and I had watched her grow into a woman who embodied everything I ever hoped she would be. That was my legacy. That was my vindication. The world may try to tear down what we build with love and care, but the foundation will always stand, strong beyond compare. And when they ask me who I am, I'll smile and answer softly. I am not defined by loss. I am defined by what I chose to share. I am vindicated.